Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's me, Victoria Dowd, and the lovely Sarah Moorhead.
Hello,
So,
everybody.
so we are going to be talking about lots of lovely things tonight. First off, a little bit of an introduction. I'm Victoria Dowd. I write the Smart Woman's Mystery series, and the fourth book in the series is out now, A Book of Murder. But most importantly, we are going to be talking to Sarah about Witness X, which is her utterly fabulous book, and also a very, very special book, which I'm going to let her talk to you about now, which is out on submission, I believe.
It is indeed. So I've written Witness X, which is about what would happen if you could go into somebody's mind and actually see the crime from their perspective, whether that's the witness or maybe even the actual killer themselves. And then the book out on submission at the moment is called An Eye for an Eye. And that is about is it possible to actually cure a psychopath by giving them certain chemicals to the brain, by creating empathy. So that's quite exciting that it's out and about in the world now.
It is just an utterly fabulous book and such an incredible premise to it as well. It's got that whole Minority Report. What would you? Because it's kind of, I know you've talked about this before, it being cross genre fiction. So, where would you put it in the bookshelves?
Well, I think I'm a funny one. I think we can only write the books that we could write coming from where we came from. You know, the way you plant certain plants in certain soil, and some will come up and be successful, and some won't. So, I come from a mixture of an Irish Catholic background, and we were very into science as well. So we're into religion and was into science, and we thought they were happy bedfellows. So I kind of was interested in crime, but I'm also interested in morality, and I'm also interested in technology. And we kind of grew up talking about, we grew up in the 80s, and we talked a lot about the murder case files and serial killers that were at a peak then, weren't they? So
Yeah,
my book's it is a bit of a trans genre or a cross genre, where I feel as it's a crime book, but it's got a bit of what you once referred to, and you told me that Margaret Atwood referred to as future fiction.
yeah,
So I don't want people thinking that it's like hard sci-fi with flying cars and all that kind of stuff. There's just a few little delicate touches to tell us that we're not in the world that we're in now. It's a little bit different, a little bit in the future. So I guess speculative crime fiction, maybe.
yeah. I love it. I love that. And obviously, with what we've all been through recently, sci-fi must be suffering hugely because the world is basically science fiction. But your books are fantastic because they do that excellent thing of you're in a normal story, you're in a normal life, apart from you're just a little bit further in the future. So slight tweaks to the world, and how would it be if things were just a little bit off kilter?
That's right. Or if we just stretch things a little bit. So, for instance, in Witness X, people have got their bank chips in their fingers under their skin, because why not? When you're walking down through the tube, you just touch something and you go right through. It's got sort of adverts that react to your cards, your bank cards or whatever, your identity, and they will give you specific advertisements that are designed for you. I've had the sort of go on about ecology a lot because I think the planet's really important. So there's a few little touches there that mention how we could look after the environment a bit more. I think as authors also, and you'll probably find this yourself, Victoria, that we want to create a world. We don't often have a lot of power in the world, particularly as a little northern woman,
Yeah,
who's just teaching and stuff. I mean, where's my power? But I can create a world where people do look after the environment, or they do try and cure psychopathy, or they do, have chips under their finger, their skin. Because I think it's really exciting to say, well, what if the
yeah.
world could be like this?
And I love it that you just give it that little tweak in that kind of if bit. It's just that moment where you think, oh yeah, what if I didn't have to always be charging my mobile phone up? Because looking at it from the point of view of just 10 years ago, we didn't have the kind of technology that we've got now, and you would
No,
never have thought there'd be a global pandemic. That was all in
no, yeah, yeah.
huge films and blockbusters.
Well,
Now
well, I've
anything.
been reading. I read a book that was written in the year 2000 by Joan Grenfell called The Tomorrow People. And as I was reading that, I was actually reading that whilst I was teaching online on Zoom, and she'd picked up on these things. She'd said in the future, you know, we're going to deliver lessons over the computer, and it was actually happening. Obviously, the book was written in the year 2000. I was reading it 20 years late because I only just found it. But a lot of things she talked about there were you know starting to come into play. And there's another guy called Mark O'Donnell who wrote about transhumanism, to be a robot, and sort of, you know, you think about the way people are changing their bodies and changing their
Yeah,
face, changing the way they look, and then you wonder what sort of technology, you know, particularly in sports, if people have lost limbs, and the sort of technology they're using now to improve those things, and you just wonder where it's going to end up, don't you? You wonder where it's kind of, you know, how far we can go, because I think humans are really, really creative, and we have loads of brilliant ideas. Oh, and as we gather the technology, then it could go all sorts of places. But then my kind of theory, as I say, coming from sort of my background, is then what's the morality behind this? To what
exactly.
degree should we be looking in people's brains? Do we have, you know, like the way the police might go to a house and they've got a search warrant? What would happen if you could look in people's brains and then, you know, they didn't give you a search warrant? There should be a search warrant for your brain, and those kind of things that were sort of happening.
And
But
the
these
misuse of
books,
it, the misuse of it
sorry,
as
Victoria,
well, because
absolutely.
having come from a sort of a criminal defense background, you see a lot where powers are misused, and I think your books deal with that beautifully. That you
But
have
going back to
huge power.
your book though, because I don't want to be talking about me all night. I do want to hear about you as well. I mean, because you see, you're going like a little bit. I feel when I read your book that we're going a little bit into a more golden age, where it's a bit more Agatha Christie.
Yeah,
We're in the Old Bailey. We're looking at a time where human beings sort of had to rely on their own instincts and their own smarts. And I love, love, love the fact that you have this Smart Women's Guide to Murder, and it's a bunch of gals who are doing it. So, you
yeah.
know, where did those things come from for you?
Basically, obviously, my love of golden age detective fiction, because it is very much that simple thing of sitting down with a piece of paper and a pen and going, how do I devise a puzzle? So, Agatha Christie herself was an enormous fan of crossword puzzles, and it is just that. I think nowadays we have, Wordle, everybody's into all that kind of thing, and obviously it's on your phone or whatever, but I think that just the simplicity of sitting down with a pen and a piece of paper and devising this huge puzzle is what I love. I love doing that. And that's what's at the center of my books, the trick of it, basically. So I really love things like Jonathan Creek, where you have that kind of locked room scenario, or the John Dixon Carr books, where, he even sets out this is how you lock a room. And where has the crime occurred, and how do you get out of this situation? And at the moment I'm working on one that is a completely new series where the room is locked. It's in fact a locked lift mystery, so I'm trying to get them smaller and smaller and smaller, so they're in a lift in this one. So, and to the point where they're just going to be in a locked box mystery. But I love that. I love the whole puzzle of it, and trying to work it out and trying to fool the reader to the point where I can reveal it and they haven't got it.
So it sounds to me like there's a little bit of a power game going on there, Victoria,
Yeah.
where you like the power. But I also think, knowing you a little bit more than I used to, I think you like the glamour of the
I
1930s.
love it.
You know, as you can see in my background there, I've got a sort of a bit of there's
Look
my
at
piano
that.
desk
Look
that
at
I've
that.
changed to have a really 1930s vibe. I think the whole my house was 1930s, and it didn't click in how to decorate it until I got the hang that the 1930s is glamorous, and it's like the golden age of detectives, and it's long dresses. So do those things appeal to you?
I love it. I love the whole thing of, I mean, when I was, 8 years old in, a Sheffield house going to a comp, I found Murder on the Orient Express on a really dusty old bookcase in my mum and dad's house. I can't imagine, many houses that don't have something like that kicking around in them somewhere, dusted down, and just I was hooked. I got on a train that I'd never heard of any of the countries. I'd never heard of any of the stuff they were talking about. I didn't even know you could sleep on a train. And
Yeah. Yeah, sleeping on a train.
But
Oh,
there's,
that's so
there's a
cool.
Russian princess, there's a mafia hood, there's an actress, there's this funny little Belgian guy with a mustache. I'm like, oh, and the world just opened up, and I just thought
And no one's telling the truth as well. They
Mm.
see this, that's another thing that I absolutely love about reading and about books is finding the truth or concealing the truth. And I'm absolutely obsessed. I've been obsessed with the truth since I was a kid. I often wonder, is there an objective truth in reality, or is it all just subjectivity? And when I was writing Witness X, the whole point of the whole reason it came about was because I get frustrated when crimes happen and you go, if just people would just tell the truth, we could find
Oh,
out who did it, we could get to the bottom of it. And I mean, you must know this as a barrister in particular, that you must get frustrated and people are trying to conceal things for various reasons, to protect themselves, to protect other people. And then, there's also this matter of, can we actually get to the truth? Because I'm always going to bring my biases with me. I'm going to bring my past experience. I'm going to bring what I actually saw or what I didn't see. I never have the full picture, and I'm coming from such a background that I can't give the truth. So when you were a barrister, did it used to frustrate you and you felt as though people were fibbing?
endlessly, because loving kind of the detective fiction of, when you go into an Agatha Christie book, there will be an answer. There is going to be an answer. But, you'd go into court and there would never be an answer. And, you
Mm.
would always get the same question. How could you possibly defend someone is guilty? And you don't know. You don't know if they. Most of the people I defended, I probably wouldn't want to go out for a drink with. But that wasn't the question I was faced with. It was
Yeah.
very much there was no answer. I could not go back. And you would get people who would be utterly vociferous. And, you would believe them. And then this huge piece of evidence would come out, CCTV, here you are doing it. And yeah, oh my God, I was utterly sucked in by this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I thought,
Mm.
yeah, so it's easier to write detective fiction, I think, than actually
Also, I mean,
then
this brings me back to an idea about, psychopaths, and I mean, again, I'm just absolutely obsessed with psychopathy. I think it's absolutely fascinating to think of people who really just get their own way and to serve their own needs would walk over people the way they do, and try, they would be so convincing, I think, when they were telling you things and lying to you, I think.
yeah,
And as a good Catholic girl, I just immediately assume everybody's telling the truth all the
yeah.
time and everyone's being good, but there's so much more to it than that, isn't there?
Oh my God. And I would literally just, I'd have an Agatha Christie book in my robes so that when we had an adjournment, I could go and sit and actually go to a book where I thought I get an answer. And I know
Yeah.
that there will be red herrings along the way,
Yeah. Yeah.
but there will be an answer. And there are no answers in reality,
I
So,
think you're right. There's no answers. Yeah, there's certainly no answers in reality, and often there isn't justice. And again, that's a big theme of both our books, I think, is
yeah,
justice. And um, that is, I do feel my blood boiling at certain things I read and I hear about where
well,
justice hasn't been done.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's something that, again, in your book, it can be satisfying when you can bring things to a good conclusion where justice has been done, isn't it?
yeah. And do you consider the setting for that and how you're going to portray that within a particular location, a particular setting, or does that kind of grow from the idea?
Well, it's funny, really, because I think with myself and my sort of future fiction, I was concerned that the time would be a little bit different. So I wanted to keep the actual physical setting as sort of universal as possible. So
Mm.
I picked London because I think wherever you are, you can kind of relate to a big city. And I didn't want to do Liverpool because it would be like writing about one of my children. It'd be so personal to me, and I love my city so much, that I didn't want to sort of portray it as somewhere where these type of crimes might happen because we didn't need any more of a reputation than we used to have back in the day.
Yeah,
So not a specific place as such, but certainly a time. And I mean, for instance, my main character, Kyra, her name means I took it from the Greek. You know, the Greek have two words for time. You have chronological time, so chronos, which where things happen in a
Yeah,
linear way, and you have chirological time where things happen that are of meaning, that are important events. And so I called her Kyra because I knew she'd be hopping in and out of time through people's mental experiences using the machine she created. And those times would be important times. So really, I suppose setting doesn't just have to be a place; it can be a time. And it
yeah.
was very, very much located in the near future. Yeah, but I know you love Dartmoor. I believe
Oh,
you love a bit of
oh
Dartmoor,
my
and you love a
god,
bit
I
of
love it.
the Old Bailey.
It's so atmospheric. I love it. And so started this new series and going into the little myths and just the tiny little things. So there's a grave of this lady called Kitty J, and she's at a crossroads with this grave. And this is an actual thing, not something I made up, but um, because so she can't ever find her way home, and it's still there, and somebody still puts flowers on it every day. Nobody knows who that is. They still do that, and you've got the tours, and you've got Vixiana, um, where there's meant to be a witch who sits on there, and when the mist comes down, she'll cry out, and there's the crying of children to help me, I'm in the mire, and people will go
Oh,
towards it. So you've got that whole kind of Sherlock stuff going on of
yeah.
it's in the mire, and I've referenced a lot of that sort of thing in my book because it's just it's an absolute playground for a crime writer out there. The mist comes down, you can't see anything, everything's
And that's
cold.
kind of, is that gothic, is it? Because I believe you
Yeah,
won a prize for gothic fiction.
yeah.
So where's that come from for you? Why do you like the gothic?
I suspect it's being a Yorkshire woman and a love of Brontes.
Yeah,
Me and my
yeah.
sister, we used to go up on the moors, and we used to go to Haworth a lot, and both absolutely love Kathy, Heathcliff, Jane Eyre. This one I've got, the Mad Man in the Attic, which I think is probably
Nice.
well
Yeah.
due its time.
Appropriate. Yeah, yeah.
But speaking of characters and characterization, how do you fit your characters? Do you grow your characters out of the idea and the place, or have you got them fixed already within your story?
That's a really good question because I th- I think the characters that we write are the reader's avatars, so that's the vehicle that the reader
I love
experiences
that.
the
I
book
love
in.
that.
And so I think characters are so important because you can have a fantastic story, but if you don't like, you can't relate, and don't say necessarily like, if you can't relate to the character, I don't think the story would be as enjoyable. So I'm still a bit of a beginner, so I tend to put my characters into a situation and then see how they manage, and then I
Yeah,
go along and try and grow them from there. But
yeah.
I'm still sort of learning as I go along, really.
And would you kill off any of your major characters?
I'd have to say yes, I would, because one thing I would love to do is write a book where people go, no, no, I'd love to have that. When you read when you write when your readers look on it, they go, I don't want this to happen, that kind of. So I wouldn't be averse to killing off a major character, but at the same time, I think, as I said before, endings have to be very satisfying. They
Yeah,
have to be satisfying, and sometimes if people do die, you wonder how satisfying that might be.
yeah. It is a difficult line to tread. So in my third book, I killed off a major character, one of the smart women, and I actually got messages from people
Really?
saying, "You evil woman," because people get invested. They get invested in,
They do.
and you don't realize how much people do because you're just, you're in your own little room writing these characters. I didn't think there was so much room for this person to move on, and just thought, okay, it's time for them to go. And I can't keep putting a number of women in jeopardy without there being a sense of real jeopardy.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I'd agree with that. But I was going to say, you don't realize also as a writer how people react to what you write, because
Mm.
I read a couple of books recently. I mean, I read Nadine Matheson's The Jigsaw Man,
Oh,
and
brilliant book.
I also read The Echo Man by Sam Holland, and I found them really dark, really
Yeah,
graphically dark. But then I don't realize that the things I write are actually quite dark. Really, they're very dark, but I'm more sort of I don't really like to see sort of beautiful young naked dead women. That's not really what I want to
no.
see. What I want to look at is the darkness of people's minds. And so in Witness X, what I really kind of focused on when it comes to character was, and this sounds a bit strange, was to try and understand why a serial killer would do what they do,
Mm,
to try, because I think murder and serial killing and psychopathy is all part of the human spectrum. It's all part. There's plenty of them out there. It's part of what we are as a species. So I think it needs to be looked at, and I think it needs to be examined. And maybe just in that respect, it was quite dark. But I don't think I'm sort of as dark on the sort of physical gore. But I wouldn't
I've
be
got a
averse
massive
to.
question here that I've circled that says, "How violent would you go, Sarah?"
In my personal life, I don't know, but um, yeah, it's really funny because my son's 12 and my husband's very wise in lots of ways, and he always says when we're watching a film at home, he says you're allowed to watch 15. He said, but when the violence turns into torture, then we
Mm,
don't watch it.
no,
When it
well,
and when it turns into the situation where someone's just getting hurt for the sake of it, then we don't watch that. We turn that off. If they're fighting like a Marvel film or whatever, they're fighting a Star Wars, okay, then that's understandable. But when somebody is vulnerable to that, and then
mm.
so yeah, I think that's the area you've got to be very, very careful. So
So no Game of
you know,
Thrones
oh,
yet.
Jeepers, it's the sex that worries me in the Game of Thrones.
I
Never
know,
mind the bloom of
I know.
violence.
Oh
Good
my
Lord.
god! Oh my god! But then they're all watching it anyway, aren't they, on their phones? So
Yeah. Well, no, we've been asked in a
I
question
know,
actually.
yeah. There's a
Um,
couple.
do each of you have a favourite Bronte book?
Mine's gonna have to be Jane Eyre.
The same, the same, the same. Now, why do we love Jane Eyre so much? Well, first of all, because when we read it, we were probably young girls who
Yeah,
could relate to her
yeah,
character.
very much
I think,
so.
yeah,
And
and
I,
also I think that it was just so unfair. It was so unfair the way she was treated, and it made me so angry, and that sense of justice that is just something that's in me. Oh, that
yeah,
was so
it's a
hard to
book
read
though.
it.
It's a book that stay. It's one of those books, few books where they've stayed with me all of my life, but I've had different reactions to them because of who I am and the stage of my life I am. So
Okay.
when I was young, I was really scared. It was a ghost story. There was something in the attic. Spoilers, I will not
Yeah.
give. Hoping people have read that, but
Go and read it
it,
now. Go
it
and
was
read it.
creepy.
Brilliant.
It was scary. It was a little girl who'd gone to a horrible school, and then she
Yeah.
went to this horrible house, and there was something in the attic. But then, as a teen, it was, Mr. Rochester. He is just sex in pants, and he's gorgeous, and he's amazing, and he's wonderful. And finally, she gets to be with him, and he makes her life amazing. But then, as an older woman, obviously, he's locked his wife, who he's got is mad, in the attic and tried to marry the young nanny. And there are those levels to that book that you just
Yeah.
kind of it stays with you, and
It
it's
really
got
does. It's
so
a work of
much
genius.
in there from this
Yeah.
really tiny young woman who, I always wanted to really like Wuthering Heights best, but that is a super domestic violence book. He is just
Yeah, I couldn't get into that.
tasteless.
I just didn't. I suppose I read it when I was a bit too innocent, and I just didn't understand Heathcliff's
No.
attraction. Really, I just didn't get it.
I read it, yeah, and then when I was a bit older, I did sort of have the kind of, but lots of people fall for the bad boy, don't they? And I like
I
the
think that's just not
supernatural
me.
element. I love the supernatural element. I love the fact
Love
that
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do.
nobody is reliable. Even Nellie Bly's not reliable. You're hearing it from
Yeah,
so many. She's there looking after somebody who's starving
yeah,
herself to death, basically.
yep, yep. Yeah.
And
I
she
mean,
was going, oh well, whatever.
and I brought a little bit of, well, I mean, I wasn't, I didn't define it as supernatural or sort of mental trauma, but after, obviously, in my book, Kyra uses a machine where she can go into other people's brains and see exactly what they saw during a crime, so she can try and piece together and try and find out who did the crime. And it occurred to me that would have a massive toll on somebody. And so throughout the book, I mean, the Germans, look, there's the German version, the sexy
I
German version.
love it. You
Oh,
are so
yeah.
popular in Germany. You
Well,
are.
look at that. They've got little pictures on it. I hope so. I think they like me because I'm kind of got long blonde plaits as well. Look at that. Is that stereotype? Sorry,
It's
but
beautiful. It's beautiful.
in Germany they've kind of put me under kind of supernatural horror. I didn't
Yeah,
realize
I
I was
can see
horrible, but
that.
apparently,
I can see that.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
got,
a little bit
I
of
mean,
that
it's
as well.
really got
Yeah.
that kind of Black Mirror vibe going on.
I love Black Mirror again. Just turning the camera on us as a species and what we're doing. What more? That is so exciting.
Yeah.
Look, we've got another question. Talking of which,
Okay.
Donna Morford. Hello, Donna. Hello,
Hello,
darling.
Donna.
Would either of you consider writing dystopia if you're interested in the near future? I would. Would you say mine is dystopian?
I would say yours is very much so.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's this
Yeah.
idea of, putting people in pigeonholes of what is what, but what is just, I mean, I also, alongside the crime books, I do write short stories that are, they're kind of, although they're quite gothic, they are quite dystopian as well, in that,
But again, it comes back to this idea of genre. And,
yeah,
I mean, I was listening to an interview with Joan Harris today, and she said, that in Italy they don't have genre as such. So when you go into a bookstore, everything's just under general fiction. Whereas there's a really cute little video of my book in Waterstones in Liverpool, where they start off with it in sci-fi, and I said it's crime. So there's a little video of them putting it into the crime book, but then it finds its way back to sci-fi, and then it finds its way back to
right,
crime. So sometimes I go in just to go, I've got a book in Waterstones, I've achieved, and then you have to look where to
exactly.
find it, sci-fi or crime.
And mine, they always get put in cozy crime, and yeah,
How do you feel about that?
well, cozy crime is definitely it's kind of like saying, is Agatha Christie cozy crime? There's nothing very cozy going on there,
No,
I
no.
like to do a kind of familiar setting and familiar sort of people, but everything's just a little bit off and something's not quite right, and then the murders begin. But yeah, I don't really know what cozy crime is, if I'm honest. How
Well,
cozy is it to kill somebody? I don't know.
I mean, the word cozy makes me think of, a nice warm fire
Yeah,
and a little glass of something to warm the blood, and
something like that. But
a nice
it makes
book.
me think of tea cozies and
Tea
like
cozies,
loo roll
absolutely.
cozies. How have we got to loo
Yeah.
roll cozies? I don't know.
So I think, but both of us as writers, I think there's elements of crime, there's elements of the darkness, there's a lot of emotional and
Yeah,
psychological feelings. I mean, one thing that strikes me very much about your books, and I really love it, is um you know the main character has lost her dad, and
mm,
that's such a big reoccurring thing. And the way
yeah.
you deal with that, because I mean your books are very, very humorous, but the emotion around losing her dad, it just hits me every time.
The
Did
grief
you
is,
find
yeah.
that was difficult to bring that into a cozy comedic crime book, or because it really lifts the book to a different level, I feel.
It was one of the main things about her that I wanted it to be. I wanted to put death right at the middle of the book. So it sounds really
Yeah.
weird, but in a lot of crime, but particularly the ones that are cozy crime or whatever, often there is obviously a death, and that has an impact. But it seems to be, I didn't want it to be a cocktail party where you're stepping over the body and trying to assess who could have done it in the room. I wanted death to be front and center, and the effect of that on people and the grief that brings and the long lasting
Mm.
stuff.
I really admire that. I really admire that, and I think that's really important. And I think I don't know about you, but again, coming from an Irish Catholic background, I mean, we talked about death all the time at
Yeah,
home. It was just really something that was always up front. It was always there. So I don't shy away from it at
no,
all. I don't shy away, and I think your book does that. And I kind of feel like I relate to it because we don't want these books that people might have written sort of 20, 30 years ago about, as I said before, naked, young, dead, beautiful women. We're looking at, well, what does that actually mean when somebody
yeah,
dies, and particularly when someone's taken away from you,
yeah.
because that's just it's just literally is one of the worst things in the world, isn't it?
And how, if I really wanted to put a vulnerable person who had first-hand experience of death
Yeah.
and wasn't really over that, if anybody ever is, and put them in a situation where death happens that is clearly a murder. So often in murder situations, I think in many books you get there's a really strong person who can deal with it. But what if you had someone who didn't know what to do, who was, quite vulnerable, had no concept of what to do, and they suddenly were faced with
Presented.
a
Yep.
death and that you're trapped somewhere with a murderer. And that whole kind of powder keg situation of how would they react? Well, they react in a number of different ways, many of which might
Mm.
not be quite attractive to the reader in some cases. So they might lash out, especially if they're with their family members, because we all go through shit Christmases and having our families
In there.
squashed together. We've all had situations recently where we've been squashed in houses with family for a lot. And if something utterly the worst of things happened in that situation, we wouldn't all act in our best way. We wouldn't all be our best self.
And I think what we've both tried to do as well is take it slightly away from the police procedural, because with the police procedural, you've got people who are possibly used to death, they're used to murder, they've been there, they've seen that, they're slightly disconnected. And in both our books, we've got people who've had first-hand experience of it. So certainly Kyra, in my book, her sister was murdered. And so I think the idea of an origin story, nobody comes from nowhere. You're not
Yeah,
born in a void, and part of the reason I love Star Wars and Marvel and such like a kind of geek is because the origin stories, and that I often think, the difficulties that we face in life, um, make you aware of justice and make you understand people more and make you feel more empathetic towards people.
yeah,
And I think that's how, as a human being, that narrative is how I cope with the difficult things that have happened in my past. And I think a lot of writers are like that in a
very
lot
much
of ways.
so.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we all write it out basically, and when you need to get it out, it comes. There's a really good question in the chat that kind of folds into this from Tony Millington. Sorry, bad eyes. Sarah, what did you think when someone quoted Witness X's Silence of the Lambs meets Blade Runner? And that is that kind of horrible loss in your life and the psychopath, but meeting, the futuristic idea or the near futuristic idea.
Oh, thanks for that question, Tony. Hello. Well, to be honest with you, now Stephen Baxter said that, and Stephen Baxter is one of the absolute gods of sci-fi writing.
You're kidding!
But what he,
Stephen Baxter,
yeah, yeah.
bloody hell!
But actually, do you know what happened? What
You
he
can retire
actually
now, my
said,
lady.
I'm in the pantheon one day. What he actually said, Tony, was that it was Witness X meets it's Silence of the Lambs meets Minority Report,
Yeah,
and
I
something
got
was
a lot.
lost in translation. And Phoebe Morgan was the editor who sort of finished off the book. I said, Phoebe, can we change it back to what you said? And she said no, because this is what's on the email. So I don't know what has happened, but obviously, I mean, Silence of the Lambs, 100%, because what
Yeah,
we're looking at is the psychology behind serial killers. And I know it sounds terrible, but part of me does feel really sorry and sad for serial killers. I know that sounds really weird, and don't judge me, but they're human beings, and they obviously got problems and difficulties, and and there's something wrong somewhere. So my heart does go out to them. So I wanted to look at the killer as a human being, which is, I do. There's a lot in Witness X. There's a lot of dialogue from the
Yeah,
killer themselves. Um, but there's also this idea of Minority Report where you can look into people's brains. So I think in a way, Tony, it didn't do me as many favors as I'd hoped, because I think Blade Runner is way, way too futuristic for a lot of readers. And I mean, Silence of the Lambs is one of the best books ever written, I think. Um, Not in its writing, but in its concept and its stories. Sorry, Mr. Harris. But and I think Blade Runner is just so iconic. There's no way it could even live up to that. So absolutely mixed feelings and a mixed bag, really, about how I feel about those
really.
things.
So you wouldn't be kind of putting yourself alongside someone like Philip K. Dick, then you'd say,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do think Philip K. Dick's my bag, really. I
yeah,
think, me and him would have a great conversation. We'd have a great drink and so much to
yeah.
talk about.
Because he must have
Like for
written
instance,
his books not thinking, well, I'm not going to be up there with, Jules
I don't
Verne.
know, but I mean, I think people, human beings, are so amazing that every now and then they have an absolute high point of genius if they're
Yeah,
lucky, and that was his, and there's no way I could hit that. But I mean, stuff like the Man in the High Castle. There's just this idea. Well, what if the Nazis won?
yeah.
I could play with that all day. I could absolutely play with that all day, and I think I would get on with him, and I think I'd also get on with is it Charlie Brooker? No,
Yeah,
Charlie,
yeah, yeah. He's the Black Mirror
who
guy.
wrote. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I would love to talk to him about his ideas, about where they come from, and what he's going on to next. I mean, all their maps. Sometimes I can't watch them because they just blow my mind.
Do you,
And
are you
and what I've
are you
loved
an
is some
inside number
some people.
niner? Do you do the inside number nines?
No, no, but I've been. I'm going to write that down right now. Inside number 9. I'm going
I
to do
quite,
that because
yeah, they're like
people have
the
said
sort of
that.
the British. Oh, well, he is British, obviously, and I liked the Black Mirrors that were the original ones before it got sold to Hollywood. I still I watch
Yeah.
the other ones as well, but I tell you what you would like. I'm watching at the moment is the Midwich Cuckoos. Uh,
Oh, is that good?
yeah, it's the same guy who wrote Day of the Triffids,
I loved that
Wyndham,
when I was a kid. I was so scared when I was a kid
and
watching
it's
that
one
on
of my
telly.
favourite books. I don't know why. It's one of those things because I don't read a lot of sci-fi and I don't watch a lot of stuff, but I love your sort of thing and that kind of thing where it's just a tiny step in the future. So you
Yeah.
can imagine,
Yeah.
yeah, this would happen. Actually, this could happen.
Yeah.
The Midwich
I do think
Cuckoo is one of those.
sci-fi puts the expression puts people off a little bit,
Yeah. So
doesn't
I
it?
don't
Um,
Star Trek, all that jazz. Although, like most kids born
oh,
in
I
the
love
70s,
Star Wars.
Star
But
Wars
not
are
too
good,
much.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Now Donna Morford's saying she went to see the psychology of psychopaths. Now I was really lucky, Donna, and I met Professor Jennifer Rees about 5 years ago when she was still just doing talks in pubs. And I absolutely the book I've written now called An Eye for an Eye about how can we cure psychopaths. Um, she a lot of what she talked about really fed into that, and I'm hopefully going to go and see the psychology of psychopaths again, and when it is coming near ours in the autumn, and I'll give her one of my books, and because just to say thank you, because she was absolutely brilliant.
fabulous.
Just really, really, yeah, really, really good. Yeah.
So do
Yeah.
you do a huge amount of research before you get going with something, or do you just have an idea and then you go dive in?
I think you've got to be very careful with research because, as you know, Victoria, I work pretty much full time teaching. I've
Mm.
got two sons. One has just done his A levels, and they take an awful lot of looking after. Um, and one has just started secondary school, and I've got my mum and dad. My dad's getting really old and frail, bless him. So I've got a lot of people to look after, and I run a youth group up the road as well for justice and peace because put your money where your mouth is. There's no point
Yeah,
talking about justice and writing about
no,
justice unless you're
well,
going to actually
there
do
you go.
something
Yeah,
about it.
exactly.
So I'm a busy bee, so I've got to be careful, otherwise I'd be, you know, falling down rabbit holes of research. So what I tend to do is when I'm writing, I know what area I want to look at. I'll try and get the draft down and I'll go back and look at those particular areas. Now, I was super, 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 super lucky because in writing Eye for an Eye, and I wanted to know about empathy in the brain and the chemical makeup in the brain. And I didn't want to make it look like a TED talk, you know. So I put an email out, a tweet out saying any sort of university's got a neuropsychology departments and blah blah blah, and it was during lockdown. I didn't really get any reply. Anyway, finally, I got a reply from a lovely, lovely doctor called Jane Martlow, and she works in the Walton Neurological Clinic, which is about 3 miles away from my house.
Oh,
And we met a number of times on Zoom, and she got quite excited about what I was talking about, and I got really excited what she was talking about. And she went and actually looked at some sort of development about empathy in the brain, and about the fact that empathy is not just a chemical reaction, but it's also learned behavior, and there's different types of empathy. And I learned. I mean, it was like having a TED talk, a personal one-to-one TED talk, and
that's
it was
amazing.
absolutely brilliant.
That's
And
amazing
what a
you got to do
lovely, lovely
that.
person to give me that time.
Well,
So I've got all that
you did
in the
all,
book without it being a TED talk, because I don't want, people
yeah.
want to read fiction, they want to enjoy it. They don't want to feel as though
Well, that's the
that they're
big
getting a
thing
lecture.
actually. I'm finding in a different way with writing something that's historical fiction now. That how do you not info dump? How does that happen?
Exactly.
How do you not go right? I've done all this, this huge amount of research. How do I not, if you're writing something about the Second World War, name the tank and on all its various ways in which it operates.
Well, I think one of the skills of an author is to keep the reader in the story, and yourself when something jars and it pulls
Yeah,
the reader out of the story. It's so hard, isn't it?
it
I
is
mean, in the
all
new book what I've done is, in fact, in the book I'm writing at the moment, while I'm kind of wrestling with it. I think you've read the
that.
If I
It's
Wasn't Here, you've read
brilliant.
that. Well, part of what I've had to do is to use a YouTube interview. So to sort of like present an idea with the characterization and the people there, so that we can see what's going on in the company without it being too much info dump. And I've also used a brochure for the company, because the
Oh, that's
company
quite
have a
cool.
certain thing. So I've kind of used that as well. So yeah. So what
Yeah.
about yourself? 'Cause, I mean, you must know everything there is to know about Agatha Christie now.
No, no, I mean, good God, there are people, it's frightening how much people know about Agatha Christie. So,
Really?
they
Oh,
know how
don't
many
get it wrong.
they know how many cups of tea she had when she wrote Murder on the
Really?
Orient Express. And
Really?
so I was very honoured to be asked to speak on her birthday at the International Agatha Christie Festival, primarily
Wow.
because John Curran dropped out. And it was during the, we'd just be coming out of COVID and all that jazz. And it was my
Right.
50th as well.
Oh, happy birthday.
And it was all, I just kind of thought, oh my God, because I'm going to be hit by people who come from all over the globe who know everything about Agatha Christie. And I always pitch it as I'm not an expert, I'm a fan,
Nice.
and I
Nice.
love her books. But I tell you what, my memory is shot these days, utterly shot. I don't know if it's my age or the books or
No, no, it's because
what.
you've learned so much over so long.
Yeah,
You and I I'm a little bit older than you, and we've learned so much, and we have gathered so much wisdom that sometimes it's just hard to put your hand on that
that's
particular
it.
piece of
Just
paper on your
too
cerebral
wise. You're
desk,
just
and
too
that's the way it
wise,
goes.
is what's happened here. Someone's asked, are you both coming to Harrogate? Yeah,
Yes, it's my first time. I am so
my first time
excited. I am
too. We
so
we are we are
excited.
we are both gonna be there. And yeah, I have no idea what to expect. It.
I've got a new dress. I'm gonna get my nails done. I've got
Have
a
you?
new pen. Yeah, everything. I've got a book. I've got a book with bags on it. I'm just gonna be like a kid at Christmas. I can't wait.
I might get badges.
You have to wear a name badge to say who you
No, I
are.
mean
I
like
don't know how
badges
these
of my
things.
book. You know, like with
Oh,
it.
that's it. I've got stickers. I haven't got badges yet.
I
I haven't got.
can't do
I
stickers
get
because they
stickers.
get stuck in my hair, and then it's a disaster. And
Hey, your
like
hair's very
every
nice.
time we
When
get a
did your
name
hair
tag,
done today? Lovely.
mine's the one on the floor at the end. So
That's because you drink too much. Oh, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. So I need to ask you then, besides Agatha, who are your sort of influencers? Because I struggle with this question about who your influencers are when it comes to your writing. What do you think?
well, obviously Agatha, but there are many. There are many, and I don't just read crime fiction. I know that's going to be like
Yeah,
that.
no, the same,
I
same.
read quite a lot of gothic stuff, like
Yeah.
obviously the Brontes and stuff, but I also read quite a lot of kind of ghost stories. I love M.R.
Yes.
James. I love M.R. James,
Yes.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
he creates that what we were talking about earlier, that kind of normality that's slightly skewed, that isn't normality. So you're
Yeah.
in what would have been in those days quite a normal environment, you're just chatting, but there's something not quite right. You know there's something not quite right, but
Absolutely.
no one can put their finger on it, and it's just tiny,
Unease.
just
Unease. It's a
just a
great thing.
tweak, just a tweak, and you're
Yeah.
absolutely shitting it. And Susan Hill is one of my favourites for
Master.
doing that.
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
The Woman in Black, I could read, I could watch, I could go to the theatre and see endlessly, and it is kind of a murder mystery. And this is where your cross genre thing that we were talking
Yeah.
about, but mine is kind of more towards there is possibly a supernatural element. I like to always put in a supernatural element. And, is it the ghost? Well, of course it's not the ghost because there aren't ghosts. But can I make you believe
Steady on,
it's a ghost?
steady on. That's a big statement to make. That's a big statement to make. Killjoy, killjoy.
But I do that every time. Well, obviously, my characters are all very grief stricken and they've lost people who they adore. So they're very much of the opinion that if there were ghosts, why would not the person I adore and love come back? I always say if somebody I loved had gone and there were ghosts, why would the really evil ghost come back to haunt us and not the person who I want to come back? And the person you want to come back isn't coming back. They're not coming back. And I try to deal with that concept in the books that
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
people who've suffered the worst of losses, when someone says, oh, well, it's a ghost, they say, well, it's not, is it? They're not coming back. Because I know they're not coming back. Because if a ghost was powerful enough to come back, the person who would come back wouldn't be someone like that. It would be someone who I wanted to see.
Yeah. Yeah. See, what's really interesting in that, I think it's just this kind of growing up with science and religion sort of
Yeah.
side by side. I think I teach religion. That's what I do. I teach RE, and I've done for a very long time. Geez, I would have killed a kid on the first day. I would have been out 10 years ago on license, but I obviously got a lifetime. I've got a lifetime commitment to it now. But you know, I'm quite broad-minded about science, and I'm quite broad-minded about the supernatural. So I'm kind of, I kind of hold the two, and again, that gives you such a great scope for for the imagination and
Yeah.
for writing, for adding things in, and as I say, in my book, is it psychology or is it actual ghosts or those sort of things? But
I love
I mean,
that.
go back to the question about sort of who influences you. I see I'm the same as you. I just read eclectically.
Yeah.
I I love a crime book. I was obsessed with I remember reading Amityville as a kid. I
Oh
remember
my
reading
God. The
Pet
Amityville Horror.
Cemetery. Yeah, yeah. Pet Cemetery
Oh,
blew me away, you
oh,
know.
that shit me
Flippin'
up.
love it. Have you read the
That
book A
was
Human
big
Skin by
fun.
Michelle Loveridge? Love that book. I love the one by John Mars, which again is completely different. I mean, John Mars, you know, I love the structure of the story where you got 5 different stories all around kind of this idea of
It's
falling in
clever.
love with the one. You know, just so many things. And also I don't always see myself as a writer, you know, somebody who really, you know, struggles with every word. I
Yeah,
just I feel like I haven't got
we all do.
the
We all do.
time sometimes to struggle with every word. I see myself more as a storyteller first and foremost, who tries to get it down, trying to get it down on paper.
Yeah,
And maybe as I progress and as I get more, you know, kind of more experience, that'll things will become easier. But you see, I've got a little tiny little necklace. I don't know if you can see that, but
okay.
it's got a label. It says Shanachie, which my family's Irish, so and my husband's Irish. And Shanachie means like a storyteller. It means a storyteller. So it
Oh,
means
that's
like it
beautiful.
means somebody who holds the ancient tales, if you like, who tells the old
Yeah,
tales.
I
And
love that.
and
I
for me,
love
that's what
that. I love that so
it
much.
yeah. It encapsulates, it encompasses what it
That kind of
means to me
oral
to be
tradition and
yeah,
passing down of
yeah,
stories. So for one of
yeah,
my books that was on the sort of outer Hebrides, and many of the stories out there, they I found this really old book, and this guy had written down the stories that many of them are lost because they were stories
yeah,
handed down and talked about like
yeah,
piskies and the
yeah,
giants who are under boulders and all that kind of thing.
yeah.
Mine's Partners in Crime, and
Nice,
my
nice.
girl has.
But mine glows in the dark. If you put it
Oh
under a
my
light, it glows
god!
in the
It
dark.
doesn't
It's a
glow
sort
in
of
the
like,
dark
you know,
actually.
like a manifestation. Like you kind of
Oh,
hoping. Like I've got storytelling. And like I'm just hoping that my career as a storyteller keeps building. So I have a little manifestation. But I also noticed that history sort of comes into my books because, do you know, like sort of in Witness X, the machine's called a Cassandra,
mm,
which is it's an acronym for something sciencey, which I off the top of my head can't remember, weirdly enough. But it's this idea that Cassandra's jar, you know, back in Greek times,
I love
and she was
Cassandra.
telling people things and they wouldn't believe her.
I
And it's
love
this
her.
idea of being a woman who tries to sort of say, look, this is what's happening. They don't
Yeah,
believe her. And you know, I felt very strongly about that. And then in Eye for an Eye, which is, you know, I'm pimping out at the publishers at the moment with my beloved agent, Ed
it is
Wilson.
bloody
Um,
brilliant there, and I think it's Kaz who's been absolutely gunning for it.
I let Kaz read it because I needed someone to have a look at it for me who I felt she would tell me the truth, you know. But in that one, there's I made up because this is so cheeky. I made up a sort of justice system for offenders, and I called it Janus because he again was the ancient Greek god, and he had two faces. He looked behind and
Yeah,
he looked
yeah,
forward. It's sort of like what you've done in the past and where you're going to go in the future.
I
So
love it.
I think the past comes into it, and the ancient tales comes into it.
I
You
love
know.
all that.
Uh,
I've got a few. I've gone more druid in my book.
Nah,
I've gone a bit
I'm going to show you
druid.
something. Wait, you'll be so jealous. We've only got about 5 minutes. So wait till you see this. Hold on. You've got to see this.
You know, she's gone.
So
She's left.
this is brings in an artifact. This is it's like Gandalf's staff, isn't it?
I
Right?
love it.
There's a 1,000-year-old oak by my house, right? 1,000 where the druids used to meet to hold court, and in a storm, this fell from it. So I didn't feel like I was
Keep
stealing,
it. Keep
but
it. You got to burn a tiny bit of it. We've just missed the solstice, but who cares? Do it.
that was my son's 18th. Yep.
I
Isn't that
love
gorgeous? What'd you burn some for? What'd you burn it for?
a tiny bit, just to let a little bit,
Oh,
only a tiny bit, just to let a tiny bit into the air. But I've got the
oh,
druids, I've got, the druid
love it.
library of Iona, because there was an amazing,
Iona.
possibly
Oh, I'd
the
love to go there.
most historic library ever on Iona that was pillaged
Oh,
from the
really?
Romans, brought back. And
Really?
I've got that in my new book that and just doing all
Fantastic.
the research on it. I could have spent a lifetime just researching that bit, and the
Really?
research part is really difficult to come away from because you actually then have to go. Now I have to go to work and do some writing on this,
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
put every single bit that I've read about into this. But what
Yeah.
next? What next? We have so few minutes to go, and I could have gone on all night, but
I could go on all
I
night,
know
honestly.
we could chat all night. Wait till we get to Harrogate Lady.
God love me. God love me. Bring the paracetamol.
I'm bringing the lot.
So next for me is saying my prayers. This is my saints. This is Saint Hildegard of Bingen. She was a writer, patron saint of writers, and Ganesh, who is the Hindu god of writing, who I
You've got them
absolutely love as
all.
well.
You've got them all.
So just hoping and praying that somebody takes up an eye for an eye, and then I've got I've nearly finished my
Seriously,
third one.
it's a
I've got a fourth
fabulous.
one planned. It's just, I'm just a career waiting to happen.
You've
And
got
what
to.
about you? What's next for
Well,
you?
today I sent off my new first in the new series to the agent. I say to the
Brilliant.
agent. It's the first time I've done this with an agent, so it's all nerve wracking. He might come back
Wow.
and say, "What the hell is this?"
Wow.
or "Who the hell are you?" But yeah, it's a brave new world or an unbrave new world. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm really, really excited about the new series. That it's got a lot in it that I wanted to be there. And so
Oh, doesn't that feel good? Doesn't that
yeah,
feel right?
it feels
Yeah.
so good. We went out
Yeah.
for lunch at the pub, me and my husband and my daughter earlier on, and I was just like, it feels amazing. It's
Oh
that
gosh, look,
moment.
we've just been offered a squishy hug from Donna Morfitt, and I am taking that squishy hug,
Ah,
Donna Morfitt.
speaking it,
I am
speaking it.
having that. I love a squishy hug me. And I'm desperate to meet Kaz in the flesh. So
I know. Are
thank
all
you.
these people in this chat coming to Harrogate? Are we meeting them? Is that
I
happening?
think Tony is, Samantha is, Donna is,
No way.
um, not sure who else, but
Hands
yeah,
up
come
if
and
you're
say
coming to
hello.
Harrogate. We need to see
Come and say
you.
hello. Caroline says she's underwhelming in the flesh. I don't believe that for one moment. I
So am
don't
I
believe it.
actually. I've got
Tony's definitely coming.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I've got
brilliant.
to, enhance my appearance up to the max. So people meet me and go, oh, "You're 20 years older than I thought you were."
Well, can I just finish on one thing? Like, on my website, sarahmoorhead.com, I've got this lovely photograph of me like that. Right. And unfortunately, I wasn't very brainy because they said, "Do you want it airbrushed a little bit?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, go on, whatever." Because they give you
Yeah,
Prosecco, so you buy loads of photographs. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And now I look about 22 on it. And like, you meet me in real life and like, oh my God, are you like 75? So never mind.
I'm getting my fake tan, my lashes, the lot done.
Well, listen, we're running out of time, but honestly, I have had
I know.
so much fun.
I
You
could,
are an amazing woman,
I could do
amazing
this all
writer. I'm
night
so
with
happy
you.
that you're finding yourself and you're becoming who you're meant to be because I
Aren't
feel
we
the same
all?
way.
Aren't we all?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
taken half a decade to
Snap,
do
snap.
this.
The older we get, the better we get. Age is a good thing. It's a good thing.
As she says, I'm in my prime, darling. I'm in my
In
prime.
my prime.
I'm off to watch Tom Cruise. He's way older than me and he's flying jets.
If he can do it, we can do it.
We all can do it. We all can do it. Who have we got in the chat? Are we all saying bye-byes in the chat?
Yep.
What are you doing this evening?
Well, I'm going to finish McGuinness, and then we're watching Doctor Strange, the new movie. It's
Oh,
just
I
come
can't
on
do.
to the chicken.
I keep thinking I will, but then I won't. And I thought about maybe a quilt, and my daughter told me it was pretentious, so I'll have to bin
Do
that.
it. Apparently, going to do tattoos that fade over a year, so I might brave it then.
Oh, I
But
definitely go for that because I've got a
can I just
massive
say,
birthmark on my face, so
you should make that
no
to
one ever
heart.
sees, no one ever sees that because I'm
Well, they
always
have
front
now.
on.
They bloody
I'm
have
always
now,
front
haven't they?
on. I'm always front on a Zoom, so no one ever sees it, but they see it when I'm in the flesh. But so I've never gone in
Oh,
for like the big stuff.
well, we'll see what happens in future. Never know. At Harrogate, we could come away with matching tattoos. I
Oh
think
my.
we're going to be running out of time. It's 7:59. I have had an absolute ball. I'd love to know what's in your mug because at least I'm honest. Guinness, the black stuff.
It's been actually
Yes.
2 mugs. And it's been
Thank
one, actually. It's been one. Oh, no. I think I've told a slight lie there, actually. It's been 3 mugs. I've been quietly sitting here drinking that cup of tea.
So, Victoria, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you
my
everyone for
darling.
joining us. We loved your comments. We loved your questions. I had an absolute ball tonight.
I
I've
can
really
never
had such a
believe
great
that
time.
people actually come and listen to the nonsense that I talk about. Like, I can never believe people actually read my books. So I'm always
I can never
incredibly
believe that we make up stuff and people talk about